Alright, so Muhammad Mokaev is not a very smart guy at all, because ever since getting himself fired immediately after UFC 304 for several different reasons that we're going to talk about in just a moment, this guy Muhammad is now quite literally begging the UFC to re-sign him. Not only that, now he's even offering to fight for free to make up for all of the dumb things that he did to get himself fired in the first place. I seriously can't even believe that this guy's story has unfolded the way that it has, so let's go over the timeline of events really quickly. So heading into his fight at UFC 304, the bad blood between Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape stirred up a whole lot of interest in their matchup, much more interest than a UFC flyweight fight would typically generate. And despite all of the drama and the bad blood from both of these guys leading up to the fight, us fans got blue-balled because these guys culminated one of the most interesting build-ups to a fight in recent memory with a 3-round staring contest. Things started popping off between these two on June 10th, 2024, when Manel allegedly assaulted Muhammad at the UFC Performance Institute. This is an interesting case because even though Manel originally claimed that nothing happened, Muhammad eventually confirmed that Manel apparently headbutted him as he was going in to shake Manel's hand. In a tweet that Muhammad made after getting fired from the UFC, he confirmed the previously unsubstantiated rumors that things did get physical between them at the PI. Then just a few days before UFC 304, things really started to get interesting as a video surfaced of Muhammad and Manel getting into a brawl on the property of the fighter's hotel. And even though we don't see any punches thrown on the video, Muhammad confirms that he himself started the brawl after he asked Manel to take a picture together, and while Manel's guard was down, he sucker punched him. And I just gotta say, what a smart thing to admit to the media, like this guy Muhammad might be a genius or something. Also during that fight week, Muhammad went on record to the media voicing how unhappy he was with how much he was getting paid by the UFC, even going as far to say that he was on one of the lowest contracts possible. And I don't know if you guys know Dana White at all, but he really loves when his boring fighters publicly complain about fighter pay. Lastly, during the ceremonial weigh-ins, both Muhammad and Manel made a big show of it all, making it seem like they wanted to fight each other right then and there, acting like they couldn't wait another 24 hours to punch each other in the face. All of this to say, Muhammad and Manel did a really good job at promoting this fight, because even though all hardcore fans were all aware of the fact that Muhammad is anything but an exciting fighter, he fooled a lot of us into believing that he was going to legitimately throw hands with this guy that he genuinely hated. But as we all know by now, despite all of the bad blood, these guys were not ready to stand on business. The fight was a boring disappointment, and I think that I can speak for all UFC fans that were following this saga that we felt stupid for believing Muhammad was actually capable of putting on an exciting show in the octagon. And as we all know by now, in response to the disappointing fight, Dana White casually announced during the UFC 304 post-fight press conference that Muhammad had been released from the UFC.
But Mokaev is the guy that you'd want to bring back to the UFC because he said his contract is totally done now.
Yeah, he is. He's under contract. He's not under contract anymore.
Okay, but would you be interested in keeping him around in the fall?
I think the PFL is going to get a great undefeated guy.
Really?
Good luck to him.
Obviously, it does not take a genius to see how visibly annoyed Dana is with how this fight went down. He even ridicules both Muhammad and Manel for stirring up so much bad blood between one another, only to end up being afraid to throw punches when they're actually in the ring together. And honestly, I kinda get it, because it's pretty laughable to me that these two jokers were so willing to literally assault each other outside of the octagon, but when they're finally legally allowed to lay hands on one another, they all of a sudden forget how to fight. Not only that, Dana revealing that they were firing Muhammad right then and there at the post-fight press conference really speaks to how fed up he was with this guy. I mean, in Dana's defense, Muhammad Mokaev does not generate revenue for the business, and according to Dana's own words, it seems like Muhammad is a pretty difficult guy to work with when it comes to the UFC staff. Also, at the time, I really didn't think much of Dana's line about the PFL is going to get a great undefeated guy, seeing as the PFL is the second biggest MMA promotion, so it kind of just feels like a natural path for Muhammad to take now that he's fired from the UFC. However, lo and behold, some bombshell leaks were revealed the Monday after UFC 304 that suggested that Muhammad and his team engaged in negotiations with the PFL while he was still under contract with the UFC. And from what I understand, this is a really big no-no, and if proven to be true, the UFC would be well within their rights to take legal action against Muhammad for breach of contract. But luckily for Muhammad, it seems like these PFL contract negotiation rumors turned out to be untrue, because during all of this drama, MMA reporter James Lynch stepped in and made a video defending Muhammad and explained that even though Muhammad has been a problematic employee for the UFC, there was never any illegal communications between Muhammad and the PFL. And personally, yeah, I do believe James here. The guy has been a respected reporter for years now, and the fact that he stood up for Muhammad when he really didn't have to makes me believe that those leaks were false. Anyways, the story doesn't end here because in the last few days, other UFC fighters have come forward to speak out about Muhammad getting cut from the promotion. The first one is Gilbert Burns of all people, kinda random. In a YouTube video that he uploaded to his channel, Gilbert claims that Muhammad was fired from the UFC because after Muhammad's win over Alex Perez, he was offered a title shot against Alessandro Pantoja at UFC 301. And apparently Muhammad declined the title offer and instead called out Brandon Royval on Twitter 3 days later. Gilbert has also subtly hinted that Muhammad is not a pleasant guy to be around and that Muhammad did not interact well with the UFC staff, but just hold on to that thought for now. Like, who knows how accurate Gilbert's claims truly are, but I definitely think that he might be onto something here. Because after his fight against Alex Perez, Muhammad did in fact call out Brandon Royval on Twitter. Then, 2 weeks later, after Steve Erceg was announced to be fighting for the title, Muhammad said in an interview that the UFC can delay but cannot deny his destiny. And even though Muhammad has never confirmed that the UFC actually offered him the title shot like Gilbert claims they did, his reaction to Steve Erceg getting the title shot is really stupid to me. Because how could he act so baffled that Steve got the title shot when Muhammad was out here publicly calling out Brandon Royval for his next fight? Like, dude, if you're going to act this butthurt over not getting the next title shot, then maybe you should have actually called out the champion Alessandro Pantoja to be your next fight instead of asking to fight the guy that Pantoja has already beaten twice. Now, not only did Gilbert call out Muhammad's behavior that led to him getting fired, but Steve Erceg himself also added to the pile just 2 days ago. Remember how I said that Gilbert subtly implied that Muhammad was a hard guy to work with towards UFC staff members? Well, Steve Erceg doubles down on this claim, saying that he personally saw Muhammad's disrespectful behavior towards the UFC crew, and he even said that Muhammad has a sense of entitlement about him.
The way he treats people, I don't know if fans get to see it, but I don't know, he just seems like he's a little entitled and thinks he's very important, which I don't particularly like, and obviously the UFC didn't like, so hopefully he grows from here and learns a lesson.
Is that stuff that you've seen or just stuff you've heard about how he treats people? Is that something that's sort of like common knowledge amongst the fighters in your division?
I don't know if it's common knowledge. I saw it when I fought on the same card as him, just the way he was treating the nutrition team and that sort of thing from the UFC, and just like little things that's like disrespectful that, yeah, I thought was odd, but
Okay, so it's pretty apparent that other UFC fighters have noticed or at least heard of the rumors that Muhammad is a diva and difficult to work with. But what if I told you that even the PFL has gotten wind of Muhammad's disrespectful behavior, and because of that, they've outright announced that they have no interest in signing him, because on August 3rd, during a press conference, the president of the PFL, Ray Sefo, told the media that they're not interested in Muhammad because they've heard that he's a pain in the ass to deal with.
Right.
And then there was a lot of great performances here tonight, but the UFC just publicly parted ways with Muhammad Mokaev. Is that somebody that the PFL would be interested in bringing in?
Muhammad who? Mokaev.
The undefeated flyweight?
No, actually, you know, I've spoken to people that is in the know, and apparently he's just a pain in the ass to deal with, and so, no, we're not interested.
And I gotta say, in this whole saga of crazy twists and turns and revelations, this, in my opinion, is by far the craziest part of the story. Like, do you know how much of a shitty employee someone has to be in order for the PFL to say that they don't want you fighting for them? Like, the PFL is like the Netflix content approval team. They will literally accept anything.
Netflix, you're greenlit. Who am I speaking with?
Like, the PFL is like a $50 hooker. They won't say no to anybody. So the fact that the PFL is outright refusing to even consider signing Muhammad really says a lot about this guy's reputation and the antics that he pulls as an employee. Guys, Muhammad Mokaev is a talented, undefeated 23-year-old kid that's not even close to his prime yet, and in spite of all of that, PFL is giving him a hard pass because how much of a liability he is. And obviously, if the PFL is willing to turn him down, I feel like like there's a very real likelihood that other promotions such as ONE FC, KSW, and Ryzen might also look at Muhammad's reputation and decide that when it comes to a fighter like him, the juice might not be worth the squeeze. And I'm not gonna lie, I think the fact that the PFL denied Muhammad as publicly as they did might have scared him a little bit, because just yesterday, MMA Junkie uploaded an interview with Muhammad, and in the interview, he literally begs to be re-signed with the UFC, and get this, he even offers to fight for free to pay back the UFC for all of the trouble that he's caused them.
Of course, I said to Hunter Campbell, I said, whatever I've done at the hotel, I'm ready to pay for that and fight next fight in UFC for free. Whatever trouble I made. I think it's unprofessional, but it's something that was in my heart for a long time. I have to get rid of it, and I think I took a big lesson. You know, I want to come back to UFC, and hopefully I will be back.
And yeah, obviously, this is a bit of a Hail Mary, Hail Allah play from Muhammad to try and get his job back, and even though this isn't the first time that he's asked for the UFC to reinstate him back to their roster, it's definitely the most desperate play that he's made thus far. And even though I can kind of respect his persistence, the fact that Muhammad is now offering to fight for free is hilarious to me, seeing as heading into his fight with Manel Kopp, he made public complaints about how little he was getting paid on his contract. Yeah, I honestly don't know what to make of all of this, but I will say that I find all of this drama very fun to follow. And although it makes me sound like a bad person, I'm really enjoying watching Muhammad try to grovel his way back into the UFC, even though he's given Dana and Hunter Campbell more than enough reasons to get rid of him by this point. Muhammad has proven to be way more trouble than he's worth, whether it be from being a boring fighter that no one cares about, to starting brawls on the hotel's property, making him a legal liability, to publicly complaining about how much he gets paid to the media. I really don't blame Dana for being fed up with this guy. And for someone who claims that being a UFC champion is their life's goal, Mokaev is doing a really good job at ruining his own dreams here. Regardless of all of this, is it not a bit hilarious how much more fun it is to follow Muhammad outside of the octagon than it is to actually watch him fight? Like, if Muhammad was half as interesting inside the cage than he is outside of it, then he might actually be a star, but at the very least, he would still be in the UFC. This guy's performances in the octagon are as interesting as watching paint dry, but his antics and theatrics outside of the cage are as captivating as it gets. Like, seriously, when's the last time that a UFC fighter sabotaged their own career so spectacularly, only to be begging Dana for his job back and to fight for free less than 2 weeks later? And let's be real here, we all know Dana enough to know that there's a 0% chance that Muhammad Mokaev ever gets re-signed to the UFC. Like, not only is this guy a boring fighter who not even the most hardcore fans care about, but he's also just a difficult person to work with, seeing as there's so many rumors that he's disrespectful to the UFC staff. And just being totally honest here, as much as I respect Muhammad as a fighter, I really could not care less if he never returns to the UFC. Like, sure, his out-of-cage antics are fun and all, but Muhammad is such a boring fighter in the ring that I really just can't feel that sad to see him go. Because even though I can say that this guy seems to not be the brightest bulb in the box, or that he seems to be a master in self-sabotaging himself, I'll say this instead. The kid is only 23 years old, and much like many other 23-year-olds, he doesn't really seem to be all that good in thinking more than one step ahead. And much like many other 23-year-old pro athletes, he's also a bit of a hothead, and he seems to have a bit of an ego problem, which definitely helps explain his poor decision-making as of late. But it's like this guy has no self-awareness, and that lack of self-awareness led him to drastically overplaying his position with the UFC, and after flying too close to the sun one too many times, he's now begging Dana to let him fight for free. I would say that that's sad, and it is, but I can't help but feel like this was an easily avoidable outcome for Muhammad that he allowed to happen due to his hubris and stupidity. Because when you're a UFC fighter, you're allowed to be boring, you're allowed to be problematic, but you're not allowed to be both. And Muhammad is one of those very rare fighters throughout UFC history that's a pain in the ass to work with while also being a guaranteed boring fighter every single time he steps into the ring. And in the context of UFC 304, if Muhammad followed up all of the drama and bad blood with an exciting performance, Dana and Hunter probably would have been willing to look the other way when it comes to Muhammad's antics leading up to the fight. But instead, during the fight week, Muhammad started a brawl on hotel property, complained about his pay to the media, and was presumably a pain in the ass to the UFC crew who were just there to help him. Muhammad followed up all of these shenanigans just to have a 3-round staring contest with Manel Kopp. So yeah, again, I really don't think that Muhammad is the smartest guy on the block. Obviously, nobody knows what's going to happen to Muhammad from this point forward, and even though I don't think it's all that likely Muhammad gets re-signed with the UFC, I will say this: if Muhammad doesn't learn from this experience and become more humble, self-aware, and professional, it doesn't matter where he ends up, because he'll probably let this happen to him again. Anyways, I appreciate you guys for watching this video. Definitely let me know your thoughts on all things Muhammad Mokaev. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.